The Google Nest camera outside Nancy Guthrie's Tucson home went dark. 11 minutes later, a masked figure appeared near the property. At 2:28 a.m., her pacemaker stopped transmitting entirely. Police say the app showed her pacemaker disconnected from her phone around 2:30 in the morning. She was abducted, giving investigators a significant timeline clue. And when the FBI traced the final phone call made to her home in the hours before all of this happened, the trail did not lead to a stranger. It led directly into her own family's living room. What investigators heard when they zeroed in on that last contact, and what they found at the scene when they arrived, set off one of the most explosive and mishandled missing person cases in recent American history. New evidence is emerging as the search for Nancy Guthrie enters its third week in Tucson, Arizona. DNA of an unknown male was found on a glove recovered near Guthrie's home. The glove appears to match those worn by the person seen in this surveillance video. The last night, the evening of Saturday, January 31, 2026, began without a single sign of danger. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, called an Uber at 5:32 p.m. from her home in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood of Tucson, Arizona. "Savannah, I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished in life. But nothing delights my soul more than watching you with your little girl, Vale." She was headed 4 miles down the road to her eldest daughter Annie's house for a family dinner and game night. The kind of ordinary evening that ends with leftovers wrapped in foil and a drive home. After dinner wrapped up between 9:30 and 9:45 that night, Annie's husband Thomas drove Nancy back to her home. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos later confirmed to the New York Times that Cyan walked her inside and made sure she was safe before leaving. Surveillance data captures the exact moment. The garage door opens at 9:48 p.m. It closes at 9:50 p.m. Nancy is inside. Thomas drives away. Now the clock is running. Inside the house, a woman who had just spent an ordinary evening with her family is now alone. The lights are on. The garage door is closed. And for the next 4 hours and 38 minutes, there is nothing. No calls. No texts. No alarm triggered. No signal sent. Just silence. At 1:47 a.m., the Nest doorbell camera goes dark. Not from a power outage. Not from a malfunction. But deliberately disconnected. Whoever did it knew the camera was there. At 2:12 a.m., the motion system registers a figure near the front of the home. Because Nancy had no paid Nest subscription, no footage is immediately available to investigators, a gap that would become one of the most consequential failures of the entire case. At 2:28 a.m., her pacemaker stops transmitting to the monitoring app on her phone. That is the last signal Nancy Guthrie sends to any device in the world. Later that morning, a friend who regularly hosts Nancy to watch a streamed church service alerts the family that she's absent. At 11:56 a.m., family members go to Nancy's home to investigate. 7 minutes later, 911 is called. Her phone is found inside the house the next day. So is her wallet, her car keys, her daily heart medication. She never called anyone after Thomas left. She never texted. She never reached out for help. In the 4 hours and 38 minutes between that garage door closing and her pacemaker going silent, something happened inside that house, and no one heard a word of it. When investigators traced the final phone call made to Nancy's number in those last 48 hours of freedom, what they extracted was not a conversation with a known threat or an unknown number flagged in any database. It was a call that ended normally at an ordinary hour with a person who had been sitting across from her at the dinner table that same evening. The content of that call, what was said, how it ended, whether anything in it pointed toward danger, has never been fully disclosed. What investigators will say is this: by the time they worked backward through her phone records and pieced together her final hours, the trail did not point outward toward a stranger. It pointed inward, and that single fact would consume the investigation for weeks. That silence, the complete absence of any distress signal between 9:50 p.m. and 2:28 a.m., is exactly what made it so disturbing. Either Nancy never saw it coming, or she never got the chance to say so. The son-in-law under the microscope, Thomas Sion, had access. He had been inside the home that night. He knew where the cameras were. He knew the layout. And in the hours between his departure and the moment her pacemaker went silent, only a narrow window of time separated him from whatever happened next. For investigators and for much of the internet, these facts alone made him an immediate and unavoidable focus. Proximity, access, timing. In a missing persons case, that combination will move someone to the top of a list very fast. The FBI visit came on February 7. Agents were at Annie and Thomas's home for approximately 3 hours. Camera flashes were visible through the windows from outside. Deputies emerged carrying blue evidence bags and wearing latex gloves. Annie's car was impounded. Unverified claims spread online within hours. $50 million in gambling debts to a Mexican casino, financial motives, a marriage under strain. None of it had any factual basis. But by the time multiple outlets debunked it, the damage was complete. Journalist Ashley Banfield reported on her podcast that a trusted law enforcement source had identified Sion as the prime suspect. When challenged on Dan Abrams' SiriusXM show, she doubled down, telling listeners her source said things had really tightened up inside the sheriff's department after her report. "We're gathering some DNA samples to get those to our crime lab, but yes, it's evident to us that she was moved from that house against her will." She added a line the internet latched onto immediately: "When they take shots at you, you are standing on the target." But here is what the internet did not want to hear. On Christmas Day 2025, just weeks before her disappearance, Nancy herself posted a family photo on Facebook. Everyone in matching pajamas, Thomas standing right beside her, holding the family dog, smiling, a man who had spent 15 years teaching AP biology and 6th grade science at Basis Oro Valley, who wrote poetry in Italian and played bass in a local post-punk band called Early Black. Not a man, by any account from those who knew him personally, concealing a double life. Then on February 16, Sheriff Chris Nanos issued a statement that ended the speculation officially. The Guthrie family, all siblings and spouses, had been cleared as possible suspects. He called the accusations not only wrong but cruel. The family had been ruled out within the first few days of the investigation. They had been 100% cooperative from the start. The family was cleared, but the investigation itself was anything but. The investigation that almost fell apart before it even started. What most people covering this case never fully examined is how badly the investigation stumbled in its opening week. These were not minor errors in procedure. They were the kind of failures that hand a perpetrator an escape route that should never have existed. When the Pima County Sheriff's Department arrived at Nancy's home on February 2, the scene was alarming. Blood droplets on the front porch were later DNA confirmed as Nancy's. Her phone and wallet were untouched inside. Small glass fragments near the front entrance suggested forced entry. The doorbell camera had been deliberately tampered with. Sheriff Nanos stated plainly, Nancy did not walk away. She was forced to leave that residence against her will. At its peak, around 400 investigators were deployed around the clock. The case generated over 50,000 tips. But behind the scenes, the errors were stacking up in ways that would matter enormously. The crime scene was released prematurely, a failure Nanos later admitted publicly. Investigators had to return days later to recover evidence missed on the first pass. A roof-mounted camera was overlooked entirely during the initial inspection. The doorbell footage was declared unrecoverable because Nancy lacked a paid Nest subscription. only for the FBI to later pull images from residual back-end data that should have been accessed from day one. And then the staffing failures. The county's high-tech search aircraft pilot had been disciplined in a dispute with Nanos and reassigned to street patrol before this case ever happened. The department's most experienced search and rescue deputy had been transferred to patrol in late 2025 without replacement. Think about what that means in practical terms. The two people most capable of conducting an aerial grid search and a ground-level tactical recovery operation, the two people this case most needed in its first 24 hours, had been moved away from those roles before February 1st ever arrived. These were not paperwork oversights. They were operational failures with direct consequences for the search. More than 20 people were detained and released over the course of the investigation. Most names disappeared from coverage within days. One did not. Dominic Evans was an elementary school teacher and the drummer in Thomas's band, Early Black. Online conspiracy theorists targeted him because his physical build appeared to match the masked figure in the doorbell footage. Evans told the New York Times he felt like someone had taken his name for clickbait and entertainment while innocent people got hurt in the process. He had nothing to do with it. The primary suspect remained the masked figure in the recovered doorbell images. For black and white frames showing a male approximately 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches, average build, wearing a ski mask and gloves, carrying a black Ozark Trail backpack sold exclusively at Walmart, with a visible gun holster at his side, suspect's height is 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 11 inches. His weight up to 230 pounds. His shoes appear large, possibly a size 12 based on the size of the tiles. His clothes are also producing intriguing clues. That ski mask has unique stitching. He had walked directly to Nancy's home in the early hours of the morning with no hesitation, no wrong turn, no sign of uncertainty. He knew the address. He had known exactly what he was walking into. The FBI released the images publicly, hoping someone would recognize the backpack, the build, the gait. The tips came in. None of them led anywhere, and the ransom note that arrived days later proved he knew far more about Nancy Guthrie's life than any random intruder should have. $6 million and a note that should not have existed. The demands did not come through the mail or by phone. They came through emails sent to CBS Tucson affiliate KOLD-TV, a second local station, and TMZ, spaced roughly 12 hours apart. The note demanded $6 million in Bitcoin, included a verified wallet address, and set two escalating deadlines. The first, 5 p.m. on Thursday, February 5th. The second, 5 p.m. on Monday, February 9th. With a more severe consequence attached. The grammar was described as flawless, structured, layered. One retired FBI agent noted the repeated use of USD for dollars, a term Americans almost never use in ordinary speech, suggesting the author was either foreign-born or deliberately mimicking that register, but it was not the grammar that stopped investigators cold. It was what the note contained: the location of Nancy's Apple Watch, a description of a specific floodlight installed at the home, a precise account of what Nancy had been wearing on the night she disappeared. Read that again. The location of a personal device. The specifics of a light fixture. The exact clothing on her body. None of these details had been released to the press. None of them appeared in any police statement or news report. The Apple Watch detail alone required knowledge of where Nancy kept it inside her home, not just that she owned one. Nancy Guthrie was known to wear her Apple Watch, and she also used an app connected to her pacemaker. Guthrie's watch and phone were found left behind in her Tucson home. The floodlight detail required familiarity with the property's exterior that went beyond a quick drive-by. The clothing detail required either direct observation or a source with direct access. There is only one explanation for how a ransom note contained all three: whoever sent it had been inside that house, or they had information from someone who had been inside that house. this was not a note crafted from public information. It was a note built from surveillance. And that implication, that Nancy's home and possibly Nancy's life had been studied before February 1st, changed the entire character of the investigation. Around February 18, TMZ received a second ransom email, described as more graphic and more chilling than the first. This one demanded a different cryptocurrency, used a new account, and cited media coverage of the case as the reason for escalation. A separate stream of emails claimed not to be from the kidnapper at all, offering information about the kidnapper in exchange for 1 Bitcoin, roughly $70,000. TMZ confirmed the tone was entirely different from the original note. A separate actor, possibly exploiting the chaos, the fake ransom, a California man arrested for texting the family that he was waiting on the Bitcoin transfer, was dispatched by the FBI within days. He had nothing to do with the case. Both real deadlines passed. No payment confirmed. No contact. No proof of life. Communication stopped abruptly, completely, and without explanation. CNN analyst John Miller offered the possibility that haunted everyone who heard it: this may have been a planned home invasion that went completely sideways and was re-engineered into a kidnap for ransom scheme because the suspect suddenly ran out of other options. Home invasion turned hostage situation. Improvised. Desperate. Dangerous. If that was true, it meant Nancy's disappearance was never supposed to end this way. It meant whoever walked into that house on the night her pacemaker went silent did not have a clean exit plan. And a person without a clean exit plan is the most unpredictable kind. The DNA that matched nobody. If this case is ever solved, the answer lies in the forensic evidence. And the forensic evidence has been simultaneously the most promising lead and the most frustrating dead end of the entire investigation. The blood on the front porch was DNA confirmed as Nancy's. Violence happened at that house. During searches of the surrounding area, approximately 16 gloves were recovered, most belonging to volunteers who had discarded them during the search. But one black glove found roughly 2 miles from Nancy's home in a field near a roadside appeared to match the gloves worn by the masked figure in the doorbell footage. The FBI extracted a full DNA profile from that glove. Unknown male. When run through CODIS, the FBI's National Criminal DNA Database, no match. The suspect had never been arrested for a qualifying felony. More troubling still, the glove DNA did not match the unknown DNA recovered from inside Nancy's property. 2 separate unknown profiles, which meant the investigation was potentially looking at more than one person. Inside the home, the forensic picture was worse. Most DNA recovered had a legitimate source: family members, landscapers, service workers, but several samples contained mixed genetic material from multiple contributors, creating processing difficulties that stalled the lab work significantly. The samples were sent to a private laboratory in Florida rather than to the FBI's Quantico facility. Former Chief Deputy Richard Castigar stated directly that all evidence should have gone to Quantico from the start. The practical consequences of that decision were real: longer processing timelines, chain of custody questions, and damage to the case's public credibility at the exact moment it needed to build trust with potential witnesses. Forensic science professor April Stonehouse from Arizona State University laid out the core technical problem. The samples likely contained around 90% of the victim's own genetic material and only 10% from a potential suspect. Separating that signal from the noise using standard profiling techniques is extraordinarily difficult. Forensic scientist Peter Valentine of the University of New Haven pressed investigators to look beyond DNA entirely. If multiple people entered that home to take Nancy, he argued, there must be physical evidence of their presence that has nothing to do with blood or genetic material: hair, textile fibers, shoe tread impressions, trace transfer from clothing or equipment. Evidence that does not degrade the way DNA does. The question was whether the chaotic early days of the investigation had already destroyed it.C.C. Moore, chief genetic genealogist at Parabon Nanolabs, offered the closest thing to hope available. Even if standard DNA profiling fails on a degraded or mixed sample, the same material can sometimes yield a different profile type suited for investigative genetic genealogy, the technique that identified the Golden State Killer after decades of silence when every other method had already failed. A daughter's words and the note left at the gate. Savannah Guthrie had spent years anchoring the Today Show, the person Americans turned on every morning to find out what had happened while they were asleep. She had delivered news of disasters, elections, deaths, and crises with the controlled calm her job required. On February 4, 2026, she was not the anchor. She was a daughter sitting in Tucson, not knowing if her mother was alive. And there was no script for that. She stepped away from all professional work, including planned co-hosting of the 2026 Winter Olympics opening ceremonies. On February 4, she appeared alongside her siblings Annie and Cameron in their first public video, speaking directly to whoever had Nancy. "We want to hear from you," she said. "We are ready to listen. Please reach out to us." 3 days later, on February 7, the three of them held hands in a second video. "We received your message and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us. This is very valuable to us and we will pay." On February 24, Savannah made the statement that stopped the country. She announced a $1 million family reward. And then, for the first time, she said out loud what everyone watching had been quietly afraid to hear: "Every hour and minute and second and every long night has been agony. We still believe in a miracle. We still believe she can come home. We also know she may be lost. She may already be gone. She may have gone home to the Lord she loves, dancing in heaven with her mom and dad." There are very few moments in a missing persons case when a family tells the world they are preparing for the worst while still refusing to stop hoping. This was one of them. The family donated $500,000 to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The same day, grief turned into action because there was nothing else left to do. On March 2, day 30 of the investigation, Savannah, Annie, and Thomas walked arm in arm to the growing memorial of yellow flowers outside Nancy's home. Audible sobbing in the recording. They left a handwritten note that it read, "Mama, we miss you so much. Our hearts are broken. We are standing on ash on scorched earth. But Mom, though we are surrounded by so much darkness and uncertainty, our love burns bright. We love you, Mommy. Our best friend." The FBI had the glove. They had the doorbell footage. They had the phone records. They had a ransom note containing details that only someone with direct first-hand knowledge of that house could have known. What they did not have, and still do not have, is a single confirmed name to go with any of it.